Welcome, everyone. Welcome. So delighted to have you here today. Please turn on your cameras if you would like so we can see you. I see lots of faces I recognize. I see lots of new faces. We are so delighted to have you here. My name is Carrie Cardinelli, new name after getting married a month ago. And so delighted to be here to welcome all of you to this fireside chat with Chip Conley and Blake Mycoskie. Please introduce yourself on the chat. We love to think of this as a big, huge gathering. Think of a big Italian table or hanging out together on the beach, even though it's a little tiny Zoom screen. What if we could all be together? So introduce yourself. Where are you in the world? And happy to know that. And what made you happy today? What was one thing that made you happy today? Pop that in the chat and have fun checking out seeing each other. How many of you here for the very first time on one of our live events? Welcome. It's wonderful to have you. We will be having time for you to ask questions and connect with Chip and Blake a little bit later in the call. So keep your questions in mind. You can put them in the chat if you have them. If you're having a particular question about your technology, you can send a private chat to me. We love reactions. If you don't know where the reactions are, go look down at the bottom of your screen. There's this little reactions button. Feel free to pick one anytime. There's hearts, there's all kinds of fun things. It's fun to do. And with that, I also just want to say hello to our live stream community. We are live streaming on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Welcome, everyone. So happy to have you. Feel free to say hello in your chat, wherever you are. Say hi. We'll be able to connect with you and share some of your questions today as well. So without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Chip Conley. We are coming to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm actually at the new MEA ranch that's under construction. Chip is at his home. And he is of course, most of you know Chip very well, founder of Joie de Vivre, Global Hospitality SVP at Airbnb, founder of Airbnb, author of Wisdom at Work, generally super interested in all topics that are interesting to most of us on aging and purpose and finding meaning. And he writes a really fun and funny blog called Wisdom Well. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely need to check that out. We'll put it in the chat. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, Chip. I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spotlight. You guys can feel free to keep it in this view, the gallery view, if you want to. And Chip, thank you for being here today.
I had the good fortune of marrying Carrie. I didn't marry her, but I officiated her marriage and her wedding with Stephen. Carrie and Stephen met at MEA 4 years and 3 months ago down in at our Baja campus. So, come on down and you might actually meet your partner. So Carrie, it's great to have you here. And this is a fireside chat. Carrie is in front of a fireplace. Blake is in front of a fireplace. I have a fireplace right on the other side from me. Blake, a man that I admire so much. Tell us what your fireplace says, because your fireplace has a quote.
Yeah. Actually, here's my fireplace. Got my wood right there. Let's see. I'll show you this, and then I'll try to read it. I don't know if I can read it. It says, this is a quote that I've put up in every single house that I've been lucky enough to live in for the past decade or so, and it's a quote that I live by Chateaubriand. So it says, "A master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing and leaves others to determine if he is working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both."
Wow, that is Blake Mycoskie. You sure you didn't write that?
Maybe in a past life.
Oh man. Well, I thank you for joining us, Blake. Blake actually came as a student to MEA. I mean, what I love about Richard Rohr came, 2 years after you came, or 3 years after you came, same December. I love it when well-known people who have been successful in their lives. Richard's written 50 books. Blake is one of the best known social entrepreneurs in the world. They come as a student and they experience MBA, and now you're teaching with me in entrepreneurship at any age in December, and you're also part of our faculty for our online purpose course. So it's great to have you here. And tell us a little bit about your history as an entrepreneur.
Okay, I'll do that. But first, I wanted to say something about the student comment, because I think that, and this goes into entrepreneurship 101, I think, is like, it's always be learning, like, I mean, that's just, I mean, I will always be a student no matter what happens in my life. And it's so important, even if you've had success, to be seeking out new opportunities to learn, because that's how you grow, and that's how you continue to evolve your organization or have new ideas or whatnot. And so I think I feel much more comfortable in my student role than my upcoming teaching role at MEA. But I'm excited. I'm excited to do both. But I'm sorry. Now I forgot your question.
So no, well, first of all, thank you. I agree. I think, I like to say that we're all mentor and an intern at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
And a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. So it is not about, thinking you know it all, because if you think you know it all, you might as well die then. Tell us about your early life and your early history as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Texas. I was one of 3 kids, the oldest, and my whole kind of existence from age, say, 10 to 18 was in playing tennis. I was a really competitive, really good tennis player, and I wanted to be a professional tennis player. And so I kind of dropped all other sports that I played and just focused on tennis, lived at a tennis academy for part of my high school years. And the reason that's relevant, I think, to entrepreneurship is tennis is an individual sport. So you either win or lose based on what you do on the court. It requires a tremendous amount of discipline because you have, you're playing against, people from all over the world at the level that I was playing, and you're only going to improve if you put in the work. And there's a lot of pressure. You see from different documentaries that are out about tennis players that it's one of the sports where there's probably the most personal pressure out there. And so your successes are easily seen, but so are your failures. And so I think it really prepared me for being an entrepreneur, because that's very much the life of an entrepreneur. And it's not a surprise to me that at an early age 19, I ended up starting my first business, which was a laundry business of all things, because I couldn't play tennis. I hurt myself. I was in college on a scholarship at SMU. I had an injury to my Achilles tendon and I couldn't play. And so I needed an outlet for competing and for applying all the things as an individual athlete, and entrepreneurship became that for me.
How'd that business do?
It still exists today. It's one thing I'm so proud of. I mean, yeah, really? I'm 40. I just turned 46. So I was 19 when I started. So the business is 27 years old now and still cranking. Now I don't own it anymore. It's actually been sold a couple different times. But yeah, there's actually about 7 of them in the country that we started, and they still exist today and do kids laundry, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I remember every time I'm on a campus that has it, I'll go introduce myself to like the delivery driver and tell them a little bit of my story, and it blows their mind.
What was your biggest lesson from that venture?
Oh, I have such a good story. I'm so glad you asked. Like, it's so funny. Obviously, and we'll get to Tom's, and that's what everyone always wants to know about. But it just tickles me when someone asks about a lesson from a business that no one's heard about, because those lessons are actually as still present in my mind as the ones from when I was, obviously successful at Tom's. So one of the best ones was, so imagine this: I'm a sophomore in college. I'm in a fraternity. All my friends, I go to SMU, a school that, has a lot of wealthy kids that don't have to work. And I hurt myself. I started this business and I say, okay, I'm going to pick up and deliver your laundry. And this is how much it is. And we take an ad in the newspaper and we literally are getting 0 customers. So first off, all the guys think it's so stupid that I'm not out, goofing off, playing golf, drinking beer, doing things with them. And I'm picking up people's laundry. Like, what has happened to this kid? And then all the girls are horrified of me seeing their panties. So they think that, like, this is so weird. Like, this is like cute guy in the fraternity. And now he's like looking at my underwear. That's the last thing I want. So I did 2 things. It was pretty funny. So the first is we took out an ad with like a 1950s, like, kind of centerfold girl or something, like getting out of the shower or something, and said, it was something about, I don't even remember now, but it basically addressed the fact that, like, is called Easy Laundry. At Easy Laundry, the only person that sees your clothes are, and then we had like our team of our laundry people at the facility, or something. But the thing that made the biggest difference in us getting customers, and I learned this from like an old like Zig Ziglar sales tape, I think I listened to, was this idea of fake it until you make it. So what we started doing is every day after school, we had a couple bags of laundry filled with our own clothes. And we would just go back and forth to the dormitory, picking it up and dropping it off, picking it up and dropping it off. And so we never lied to anyone, but we made it appear that we were really busy. And so it's just a herd mentality. And so once other students start seeing us constantly coming to the dorms and exchanging laundries, they just said, gosh, if other people are doing this, I'm going to sign up. I don't want to do my laundry. And so basically we created the perception of success and momentum. And so next thing we know, everyone was signing up. And then when a couple people signed up and they had good service, we provided great service, and they tell friends. But it needed a little bit of people not feeling that they were going first to get it started. And so it was a little bit misleading, but I was only 19, and I've forgiven myself for whatever misleadingness I did.
Well, so I relate to that completely, but I'm going to go psychological on you, and I think you're going to be okay with that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So as entrepreneurs, we want to put on the show, and we want people to think we're doing really well. And sometimes that means our ego gets pretty involved. And how has that been for you over the course of your life as an entrepreneur, where there can sometimes be a gaping hole between how people perceive the successful, happy Blake and how you're feeling, as well as the other piece of it, when our ego gets so involved that our relationship with our business is almost like, I am my business. And okay,
yeah.
I'm going to step back, and
that's
a lot
you
to
hit
unpack.
a good one. No, you hit something that's like so powerful. I'm gonna start crying. So I had so many amazing experiences at Tom's, and the purity of what we created when we created it was definitely the most like beautiful.
Explain
and
a little bit about
honest.
Tom's. Give a little bit of background.
Sorry. In 2006, after having started some businesses, some successful, some not, I was down in Argentina, vacation, having fun. And down there, I met a woman that was doing volunteer work. And she explained to me that a lot of these street kids that I was seeing in Buenos Aires and outside the city, one of the reasons they weren't in school was their families didn't have enough money for the proper uniform, which included a pair of shoes. And that shoes were very expensive down there, especially for people who didn't have much means. And at the same time, I had seen a lot of my friends that were playing polo and just different people, like young people in Buenos Aires, walking around wearing these alpargatas, which were like espadrilles. And I'd never seen this type of shoe before. And I grew up with Vans and Converse and vulcanized shoes with the big kind of soles. And these were like almost looked like slippers. And I just thought they were really cool. And the seeing those shoes and then hearing about kids that need shoes, I was on a farm one morning having an espresso, and I just had this idea, and it was like, why not start a shoe company where every time we sell a pair of shoes, we would also give a pair away? Because there's a lot of people in the world that don't that can't afford shoes, that need shoes, like these kids for school. And I think my friends would really love this shoe that I discovered in Argentina. So I think I could sell them back in California. And so the idea, we made some samples in Argentina and we brought them back. And originally the shoes were called Shoes for Tomorrow, because the idea is if you buy a pair today, we'll give away a pair tomorrow. And so they started off being called Tomorrow shoes. But then when we had to make like a tag for the shoe, Tomorrow's didn't fit. So we shortened it to Tom's. And so that's how we got to the name Tom. And it started, really humbly, me selling them out of my apartment in LA, and then eventually selling them out of an Airstream across the country to, then kind of selling them in all the stores in America and then all over the world. And then our little 1-for-1 model to date has given about 110 million shoes to children, or I guess 220 million shoes, 210 pairs. And it's really, I think, made a huge difference into how business is done today in entrepreneurship. And so that's the short version of the Tom story.
Okay, perfect. Now let's go back to the question around ego, as well as the question around feeling like there's a disparity between how you are feeling and the way things really are going versus the way we want to portray ourselves in the world. I'll just say to myself, listen, I'm a big fan of the Enneagram, and I'm a 3 on the Enneagram with a 4 wing. And you better worry about the 3 in terms of as someone who's putting on the happy face and everything's going fine. If that 3 doesn't have, for those who don't know the Enneagram, it's an ancient personality typing, really a spiritual personality type tool. There are 9 types. And I am of a type that I learned about this at age 22, that if I wasn't very careful about having some integrity behind the smile and the bravado, that I was gonna lose my soul. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your experience with that, and then we'll go back. Sorry, we're going psychological here, buddy.
There's no way anything else is going to happen this hour if I start this. So I'll just start and we'll see what happens. I mean, this is if I ever wrote another book, I'd write it about this single question. So you've tapped in unknowingly or maybe knowingly to like one of the biggest lessons and experiences of my life. So here we go. Okay, so we start Tom's, and it's a radical idea. I mean, 2006, no companies are giving anything away for what they sell. Most big companies, write a check to a nonprofit at best at the end of the year for tax reasons. There is no other kind of 1-for-1 idea. Most of the business consultants and people that I share this with thought this was crazy. How will you ever make money? No one's going to care. I mean, I was met with a tremendous amount of skepticism and resistance whether this would ever work. We had some incredible lucky breaks. Vogue magazine featured it. LA Times featured it. Ralph Lauren decided to give them to his friends for Christmas. Next thing we know, Tom's is not just in the spotlight, but in a position that literally no other shoe company I've verified in the history of shoes has ever been in. And that was, we were selling more shoes faster than Nike ever had at its early days, that Crocs ever had. It was so powerful that Nordstrom, our number 1 customer, had to bring in shipping containers during the holidays and put them in the parking lot just to have enough backstock, because they were selling thousands of pairs of Toms a day. So they didn't, they never in the history of their business had ever even done anything like that. So, and because the story had so many kind of lessons in it, I was being asked to speak, at all the colleges and conferences in the world. And it was exciting and it was fun. And I went from entrepreneur to kind of like, rock musician is what it felt like. I was speaking to 50, 60,000 people sometimes. And I say all this because, you can't help but have our good friend, the ego, show up when this happens. And it wasn't even so much the ego, is that the thing that was so hard on me eventually was I was always very vocal that this is a for-profit business. This is not a nonprofit. This is not charity. This is a business that helps people, but it's a for-profit business. And as profit is a motive, you run it like a business. And I never positioned myself as like this like saint, this Mother Teresa, like just helping the poor. But the media really loved to position me that way. And when people would intro me at a speaking engagement, they would reference people like Nelson Mandela or Malala. I mean, this is not me. And so after doing this for many years and kind of giving the speech and seeing people cry and see people like fall at my feet almost, I really started to feel like I am a fucking hypocrite. Like, I make millions of dollars doing this and I help a lot of people, but like, I'm not in the Nelson Mandela category at all. And I got to a point where I didn't even want to tell my story anymore, because I was so kind of grossed out by the perception people had, that was a perception I could never live up to. I was put on a pedestal that was impossible for me to live up to, which then made me feel like I had misled people, and that was never the idea. And so it really took a lot of the joy away from it for years. And I ended up, drinking more than I'd ever drank in my life at these hotel rooms when I would go home at night, and really started to become very reclusive and turning down lots of media. And because of that, that really made Tom's business suffer, because I was the spokesperson, I was the cheerleader, I was the enthusiast that got people excited. So when I started kind of pulling back with my excitement, it definitely affected the business, which then created even more problems and concerns. And ultimately, everything works out perfectly in life. There are no mistakes. It led to, kind of this beautiful, like insatiable desire to understand myself and my childhood and my inner child, and to do some deep inner work. It took me to the Hoffman Institute, which I think really changed my life. It led me to work with plant medicine, which has had a huge impact on my life. And it's allowed me to really heal some of the things that were coming up because of that experience. And everyone's story is different, but I think what I've found in my life is everyone has a version of that story where, they felt like, well, if people really knew me, they wouldn't love me as much as they do. And that could be your kids, that could be your wife, that could be, your boss. But everyone, I think, has that. And I think that imposter syndrome is something that, unless you do some work to really face it, it can really wreak havoc on your life. And it did on mine for a number of years. And at the same time, I'm really lucky that it did, because it led to some deep, deep work that's really transformed me and given me a freedom that I didn't know it could even exist back then. So,
wow. Thank you for that honesty. And so, yeah, I think part of what I hear you saying is that there was an identity. There was the Blake on the marquee.
Yeah, capital B.
And capital B. And it's really hard. We all have identities. Sometimes the identity is being the mother, and all of a sudden you have an empty nest. Sometimes the identity is being the marathon runner, and then you have serious problems with your joints and you can't run anymore. You could be the community activist who actually gets pissed off at their community and doesn't want to help their community anymore. It is hard, especially in midlife, to actually start to peel back those identities when you don't know what you're going to be replacing them with. So we're going to talk about plant medicine in a few minutes, so you don't have to go there, but how has that, what has been that process for you to learn how to find the new identity?
Well, that's part of what brought me to Modern Elder Academy, right? As when I came for the first time, it was kind of at the end of two things that were happening in my life, two big things. One was me fully exiting Tom's, and the second was I was getting divorced. And so two massive identities now, in a sense, stepping away from. And, I think there's two ways to answer your question. Is I think we all get uncomfortable in that, I think you call it liminal, is that right? Liminal space between identities. And so we feel that we need to replace one identity immediately with another. And I very much felt that. And I think it caused me to kind of get involved in other business stuff that, maybe I didn't have as the same kind of like dying passion for that I had for Tom's, was not good. But I think the thing that first, like now, what I'm looking back on it is, I think it's almost as or more important to get comfortable without having to have an identity that's constructed besides I'm Blake and I'm a lot of things. I'm a dad, I'm a son, I'm a student, I'm a teacher. I'm someone who loves surfing, but I also love business. I don't need to be so perfectly constructed into something that people can say Blake is this. And I think that can be really hard for people if they've had such a strong identity, or in the case of Modern Elder Academy, if they've had a very strong career in one space. So before you can even imagine thinking of a second half of your life, as Richard Rohr would say, or as you would say, or next chapter or whatnot with Modern Elder, I think the first step is, how can we be comfortable just not having a nicely constructed identity at all, and be comfortable with being kind of a myriad of things. And so that's definitely where I feel like I've landed after trying to replace the Tom's identity with another identity, and instead it's just being comfortable being lots of different things, and knowing that that's kind of a beautiful way to live, and it's not as restricting as I got to fit nicely into this box. Because when you do that, what happens is, it goes back to the Tom story and the question you're asking initially, is then you start sacrificing things to serve the identity versus really following your heart. And I think that's you end up, the identity becomes your master versus really living authentically and in a flexible way of following your heart and living in that way versus just trying to keep your perfectly constructed identity intact.
Beautiful. So last question related to Tom's is, what are one or two key leadership or entrepreneurial lessons that you would like to share with maybe a budding social entrepreneur or entrepreneur who's listening in or watching this today?
Man, I mean, I have so many, but I just think of one of the ones that I really wish someone would have told me, and it would have saved me a lot of pain, is this whole idea that once you get to a certain size in sales, or once you get to a certain size in your business, that you need to bring on these experts, or that you need to bring in a president or a CEO. Like entrepreneurs, some entrepreneurs make great leaders and great CEOs, and some don't. But I think, at least when I was at that stage of my career, it was there's a lot of pressure that, oh, you've now hit 100 million in sales, you better hire, a VP of e-com from, a massive company. Otherwise your website's never going to be able to handle the growth. Or, you need these incredibly complex systems, because all big businesses need these systems. And so I brought in a lot of experts, per se, and it destroyed our culture. I mean, it really did. And it was really sad and hard to watch. And then when your culture gets hurt, then your whole business gets hurt. And so that was a really painful lesson. And I've shared that with other entrepreneurs, friends of mine, who have not done that. I've seen their businesses continue to thrive and grow without all the quote professionalism that is often recommended. And so, there are times for a great consultant, or there are times for a great, new leader of the company, for sure. I'm not saying that every entrepreneur should be CEO at all, but I think you have to be very careful, because companies are so fragile when it comes to the culture. And people usually who've joined a company, especially if it has a mission or a purpose or something larger than just making money, they're there because they believe in the culture and in the leader, and usually the founder. And when you change that, it's like changing who they're dating or what relationship they're in. Like, they're now being forced to be in a relationship with them. They might not share the same values. They might not share the same vision. And I did that and didn't realize until it was too late the effect it was having on the key people that really were responsible for our success in the first time. And so I highly recommend being very, very cautious when hiring and making absolutely sure that there's a culture fit. And a quote I heard a little too late, but I still like to share it, and it's relevant because he just made an incredible announcement last week. Is from Yvon Chouinard in Patagonia, and Yvon said, I would much rather hire a climber and teach him business than hire a business person and try to teach him how to climb. And that really resonated with me, because I think you find a person that's the right cultural fit and they had the right attitude, you can teach them the core competencies of finance or HR or production. And that person will be so much more valuable to your organization than bringing in a business person and trying to teach them what it's like to care for kids in developing countries. And so, and so I wish I would have heard that earlier in my life, but I like to share it for those who haven't heard it.
Any thoughts on Yvonne's new approach to saying the only shareholder of Patagonia is the Earth, the planet?
Hey, amazing. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, I've known Yvonne and I've obviously been a big fan of Patagonia since the earliest of days, and I was always wondering like how he was going to kind of wrap up this as he gets older, and as he thinks about his transition to the next, whatever you believe happens. And this is perfect. He just nailed it. I mean, he nailed it. It's exactly the right thing to do. I think it'll set the bar for a lot of companies and founders in the future. It's so much more tax efficient. It's much more, it's going to get it's going to get these amazing grassroots nonprofits that are working to protect our planet the resources they need, for as long as Patagonia keeps making cool products. And so that's how it should be. And it's absolutely beautiful. If having seen that, I would have even done other things differently at Tom's now that I see that too. So hopefully people are really paying attention. Hopefully people who've been inspired by Tom's are equally, if not more, inspired by that. And then combining the two, I think you have a real magical formula on how businesses will be created and how they will play a huge role into helping in social issues for the future. So he nailed it.
Beautiful. So having spent some good time with you the last few years, I do know that your shift has really been toward your family and toward your kids in particular. What was the catalyst for you to realize that it was time to invest more time in your kids?
It's so interesting. Probably my divorce, if I really think about it. Like, I think once I got divorced and I realized like I have shared custody, we each get 2 weeks a month. And I kind of was like, whoa, like I just got my time with my kids cut in half. And they're growing up fast. And this is such a unique moment in their life. And like, I don't want to miss out on anything that I don't have to. And so doing more businesses, doing more investing, doing even more philanthropy, like that's all great, but I can do that in 15 years. Like, I mean, I'm pretty healthy. I think I'm going to live a long time, knock on wood. But I'm not going to ever get these 15 years back with these kids. And the effect I have on them is probably going to have a greater, especially with the resources our family has, is probably going to have a bigger effect on the earth than what I do in the next 50 years. Because if I instill the right values and teach them the right things and, really help them with their curiosity and their passions, what they might be able to do with that, plus kind of the resources and legacies from Tom's, will be something really substantial. And if I don't focus on the fear-based side, they have the opportunity to have really challenging lives, because growing up with privilege and resource can be very difficult if you don't have the right values instilled. And so, I really, my friend Ben Kesey just made a comment. Hey, Ben, that's so cool. I love you. I
know Ben.
So you never know who's listening. So I think it just became very clear to me that that, that this was an opportunity that I didn't want to miss. And someone else just posted, your kids will teach you more. And I agree. I mean, my therapist always talks about my daughter being my dharma, because she's challenging. She's 4.5, and she has some real spunk and some real attitude already. And I have a feeling it's just going to get worse. And the best, I mean, because I learned so much. I've learned patience. I've learned so many things with her. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity, not only for me to instill values in them, but for them to continue to refine, my evolution as a human. And so I'm really lucky. I live in Costa Rica with my kids. My ex-wife, lives in the same town. And so, we get to do something really unique with them, and really, get to educate them in a non-traditional way. And it's beautiful. And so, it's what I've spent, the lion's share of my time with now when I have them. And then when I don't, then I take lots of adventures and do some fun things that I missed out on working so many hours a week as I did in the early years of my entrepreneurial life.
Speaking of adventures,
Yeah.
last question before we go to the audience. And audience, you can go ahead and start raising your hand, and we'll put you in order. So where is your purpose now? What is it that fills you up with a sense of purpose? You adventurous soul, Blake Mycoskie.
I mean, this is definitely the biggest adventure I've been on. A number of years ago, I went to South America and had my first ayahuasca experience. And that was after hearing about it on podcasts and through friends of friends. And I was going through some challenging times. Like I said, some of the, kind of self-induced, guilt around the success of Tom's, and, and being kind of put on this pedestal, challenging marriage, a bunch of different things led me. And it was the most profound spiritual experience of my life. Like, I've always been very spiritual. I've always, looked to Christ as a guide. And this just kind of blew open the whole cosmos for me. And it really helped. I say the best way I can describe it is like I had a date with my soul. And I really saw me as me, not as the identity of me. And it changed my life, and it made me a lot calmer. It took away a lot of my anxiety. It made me love myself in a way that I didn't even know was possible. It made me forgive people in my life that I was holding grudges with. It made me kind of see that we're all on this beautiful journey, and there's no judgment. Everyone's journey is different, and I don't know what's right for someone, and they don't know what's right for me. And it just, it did more for me in 6 hours than any amount of therapy had done at that point, or any amount of other kind of classes or seminars I'd gone to. And so it had a huge impact on me personally. And then that led me, as usually things like that do, to saying like, well, gosh, this could if I thankfully don't have any capital T trauma in my life, but there's a lot of people in our country that do. And how could this be used to help our vets, or people who are struggling with opioid addiction, or people who have postpartum, or I really got interested because I care about helping people. I mean, that's been bred in me since the beginning. And so I had the opportunity a number of years ago with my good friend Tim Ferriss to help endow, and a few other amazing philanthropists, the first kind of educational department at Johns Hopkins to study psychedelics and consciousness. And so through that, we've been able to do a lot of research to show the efficacy of things like psilocybin, and we've started to really change the way that lawmakers and other people think about these medicines. Right now in the United States, these are except in some cities like Oakland now, or in Oregon coming up this year, these are Scheduled I drugs. And so my realization is that we have really gotten this wrong in terms of what we call medicine and what we call drugs in our country. And a lot of the things that we currently call medicines, if you just look at objectively and their effect on people, are more like addictive drugs. And a lot of what we currently call drugs, like MDMA or psilocybin or mescaline or ayahuasca, are actually single use or 2-use medicines that change people's lives, that help with PTSD in ways we've never seen. And so where we are right now is this, we just, in the last election, Oregon was passed that psilocybin will now be legal to use in therapeutic basis. And so this next year, there's going to be all kinds of treatment centers and therapists that have been trained to administer psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms is the other name for it. And this is going to be amazing to see. And so I'm, spending a lot of money and time making sure that places like Oregon do this right, and that, it really gets administered in a way that really is positive for people and really helps. We're very, very close with the MAPS organization of having MDMA through the final stage of FDA trials, which then will allow them to commercialize it, and MDMA will be able to be administered with therapists as well. And so where I fit into all this is mainly as a donor right now, and also helping a little bit on the legal front with different ballot measures that are coming up that'll legalize it in additional states. And it just feels like I feel so grateful because I feel like I'm part of something that's truly going to be historic. I think my kids, when they have marital problems, which they will if they get married, they will go to a therapist and have an MDMA assisted therapy session that will save their marriage. Like that's going to happen in my life, I believe, because of the work that we're doing now. And there'll be people who, are coming back from war, instead of being put on, 10 different, prescription medicines and having nothing work, they're going to sit and have a ayahuasca journey, and maybe in the state of Colorado. And their marriage is going to be saved, or their relationship with their kids is going to be saved, or they're not going to kill themselves. And so I think we are in a mental health crisis in our country and in the world. And I think there's nothing that science has shown that has a greater possibility of affecting that positively than plant medicines administered by professionals in the right set and setting. Like, it's really important that I say that. Like, the medicines on their own cannot have the benefit and can be very dangerous. But if administered like any other medicine with a therapist or a doctor in the right set and setting at the right clinics, the right hospitals, they have nothing short of miraculous results. And so I'm pretty much pledging most of my net worth to this, and I'm spending a lot of time helping the people who are the real heroes working on the ground in these spaces get the resources they need, so that we can kind of change culture's perspective about what is a drug and what is medicine.
Beautiful. Thank you. I can feel that purposeful social entrepreneur who's trying to solve not a consumer need, but a societal need. And thank you for the good work you're doing here. All right, we're going to open it up. And we have only two people with their hands up right now. So for those of you who want to ask a question, this is the time to raise your hand. Matt, I have a feeling Matt might be a friend of Blake's, if I'm not mistaken. Matt.
I am. A long time ago, I used to battle him on the tennis courts. Of course, he used to always get the better of me. But I do have a business question for old Blake. I am actually in a meeting here in Dallas at the moment. I got to buzz out of here real quick. But Blake, long time no see, buddy. Let me ask you, on your trajectory of Tom's, was there ever a point where you felt like, this part is not going well and this could go awry in a hurry? Or was it always just a straight up, a path to the top, if you will?
Well, first off, it's good to see you, Matt. It's so fun to see a face from so long ago. Yeah, definitely there were some crises. Probably the first and the one that comes top to mind was production. When I started Tom's, I was not in the shoe business. I was not in the fashion business. I had never produced anything, and so making the shoes and making them as fast as we need to make them based on the demand was incredibly difficult. We had a lot of factories take advantage of us and of my naivete, and we lost a lot of money in the early days, trusting factories that we shouldn't have trusted. And so the most stressful moments and the most kind of crises we experienced, at least in the first 5 or 6 years, was all related to and I think that's not surprising, because I just didn't have any experience in it. And I don't think I have a piece of advice that would allow someone to avoid it. I think that when you're getting into a new business that has a technical aspect to it, and that's where I do think, going back to experts, I did bring some experts in the production space. It actually was a really good idea and didn't affect our culture in a negative way, largely because they were really focused on the manufacturing piece, and they weren't put in a position where they were going to affect the culture that much, and they could really do what they need to do with the factory owners in the countries that we produced in. So yeah, that was the biggest challenge.
Beautiful. Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Joe.
Yeah. Hey, Blake. I'm like shaking right now. Just your book, Start Something That Matters, took me from being homeless about 18 months ago to giving over 50,000 people clean water. So thank you for writing that. But my question is during this like social entrepreneurship journey, did you ever get like lonely or feel guilty that you weren't putting enough time into relationships that you had before? And like, how did you deal with that?
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Man, that's powerful. Yeah, I think that being lonely as an entrepreneur is probably something that a lot of entrepreneurs experience, Joe. You really have to make a lot of sacrifices. I tell people today, like, I think there's a reason why so many companies are started by people who are under 30, because they typically don't have maybe serious relationships with kids, so that they can put everything into the business. And it's hard. I mean, I think my advice is just try to find other entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs typically kind of understand what other entrepreneurs are going through. And it was hard for some of my friends to really understand why I was putting so much time, like back in the laundry business days, for sure. My college buddies didn't get it. And so that was a time that was definitely lonely, and there's a lot of ridicule I felt from them, and kind of almost, being made fun of and stuff for doing laundry when I could be out, having fun with them. But yeah, I think that that's just part of it. And the best way to kind of address that is to try to find peers, that are also out there, building something, and I think that's a great way to really have some community, even if you don't have a lot of time.
Beautiful. Joe, we were there for you. There's lots of go Joes in the chat. So, and I just want to add, Tony Shea was a very good friend of mine. Tony, I've written 5 books. Two of those books he wrote the foreword, and he's a guy who had a lot of people around him. And I knew him really deeply and well, which is not what most people couldn't say about him. But I also know that he was very lonely at the end of the day. So I think there's a lot to be said for learning to understand that having a safety net, an emotional insurance, the collection of people who are going to be there for you, no matter whether you're successful or not. And how are you they're not there just to help support you, but you're there to help support them too. All right, we're going to go to LPP, Linda Parker Pennington.
Thank you, Chip, and hi, Blake. And I'm a big fan. I have more Tom's shoes in my closet than I want to admit, but they're all from a recycled store, from various thrift stores. So I'm also helping save the planet. And you're talking about such important things in terms of mental health and wellness and being centered and just coming back to yourself. And quick plug for Black Modern Elder Week happening October 9th through 16th in Baja. Tell your friends, won't be the last one. And so my question I already put in the chat is really about culture. And, you mentioned bringing in these, experts, and the culture went south. And so culture can be very esoteric. So I was looking for more specifics. How did you notice it? What did it look like? And then there's this notion of, slow to hire people, especially in the early stages, quick to fire. If you make a mistake, own it, right? And, do it with grace. So those are my questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start with the second part. I think that's one of the great lessons that entrepreneurs can learn is slow to hire, quick to fire. I didn't do that. I learned that a little bit late. But when I did have to make hard firing decisions, like within a day or two afterwards, I was like, why didn't I do that, 6 months ago? So that is a great lesson for anyone listening to hear, like, is another kind of entrepreneurial tip is like, when you know something's not working, don't let it stay past its expiration date. Like, make the hard decision, have the hard conversations. And oftentimes if you're not happy and the organization is happy, they're not happy either. And so usually it's a relief for them because they know that they're in an environment where they're not being, they're not thriving. In terms of what it looks like when it's wrong, I think, what it really, for me, and I think this is another piece of advice for entrepreneurs, is like, when you have those first 20 or 30 employees that really are the ones that built the company, that shaped the culture, when you start seeing them getting disengaged or frustrated or not speaking up or kind of timid, then there's often some form of intimidation or fear coming from the people that you've hired that now have oftentimes become their bosses. And so I think it's really important to stay close to those first 20, or depending on the organization, could be the first 2 employees if it's an organization with 5, but those first people that were really there with you in the beginning, oftentimes, especially if they last for a couple of years, which mine had been there for 4 or 5 years before I started making any big hires, they're going to have a pulse on the culture often better than you, because you're out selling or doing things or dealing with, a lot of stuff that might not be as close to the people on the ground or the people in the front lines. And so I think it's great to, at times you're going to need to bring in people that are going to become people's bosses that, been there a long time, but it's also really important to keep a connection to those early employees on the front lines as a leader of the organization, and you can avoid missing things.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks, LPP. From here forward, it's lightning round. You get one question, say it pretty quickly, and Blake will answer it relatively quickly, and we'll keep moving on. Tizzy, you're up.
Oh my gosh, lightning round. Hi, Blake. Of course, I had like 10 questions, so I'm going to go to the last one, which is, are you still investing in entrepreneurs? And if so, how can I pitch to you?
Oh.
I mean, it was my last question.
That's good.
That's fine. I'll do it and have a really quick answer. Yes, I am. And the only way to pitch to me, unfortunately, is if one of my investment people that run my investments. I don't really have an open opportunity for people to pitch, largely because I'm spending so much time being a dad and working on other things.
Beautiful. Tizzy, I'm glad you asked the question. Thank you.
you.
Deborah, you're up.
Hi. Okay. So I 2 years ago, I would have asked an entrepreneurial question because that's what I know about Blake, the little bit that I do know. But my fascination now is more about what you shared about your mental health journey. And everything you said just spoke to me to where I almost wanted to cry. If it can really happen with a psychedelic encounter, I've spent so many decades of my life going through my entrepreneurial life and now finally finding myself through teachings like Richard Rohr's, but I'm terrified of psychedelics. And so for somebody like me who would seek out like a mental health experience and be supportive of the efforts that you're doing, what would you say to somebody like me who wants the healing but is afraid of the experience?
That's a good point. Really good. I mean, I'm not going to lie, these experiences are not necessarily fun and they can be scary. I think the best thing is to really research. There's lots of great books. There's amazing podcasts. Berkeley has a new website that launched after Michael Pollan's Netflix series, How to Change Your Mind. I would start by watching that if you haven't seen that already. How to Change Your Mind is on Netflix. And then the site that they launched to go with that through Berkeley Center is great. And so I think you can only do so much research, but research can make you feel more comfortable because you can hear about other people's experiences. And then if you decide to go on this journey, then you need to find a place where it's legal. So oftentimes it's outside the US. And then you need to go with a retreat center that's reputable, that has great, references and has been doing it for a long time. And so I think that is your best bet at having an experience that will be positive and that you won't have so much fear. But I think fear is part of the process. Anyone that tells you not, I don't think would be being authentic with you.
Thank you for sharing. I met you back in 2014 on a flight. So traveling internationally, I'm a flight attendant by trade, and
Great.
Heather was at
Thank
that
you.
time. That's not a
Thank you,
problem.
Deborah. We have time for 2 more questions. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. It's going to be Rana.
Okay.
Go
Hi.
ahead, Rana.
First of all, I'm 71 and delighted to think I am midlife. That was the first
Great.
time I thought of myself midlife today. My question is more of a thought and a compliment to Chip and the thought for you, which is I see Chip moving into looking at women's experiences in the world, and living in a female body is not the same, especially as an entrepreneur, as living in a male body as an entrepreneur. There are a lot of lessons on topics you talked about that the women's community has been through. The work on imposter syndrome started for women in 1978. So this is kind of an encouragement to say there are communities of people who've been through what you're feeling, who weren't in a position to share that information before, who I think could share a lot of that valuable information now. And congrats to you guys for your authenticity, and to Chip for making it possible for people who were not recognized to be recognized finally.
Thank you so much, Roma.
Thank you, Rana. Chip obviously lost his connection, so I'm just going to grab one more. I'm going to grab Eddie. I'm going to bring you up, and that will be our last question for today. Eddie, take it away.
Thank you, Carrie. Nice to meet you, Blake. I saw you on the Rich Roll podcast. I love that conversation. So thank you for your honesty. Too bad Chip's not here. I followed him for a long time. Just very quick about identity. I've struggled with that throughout my whole life. I've been in different industries, so people have just different ideas about me, and it's complex because sometimes you need identity, especially in business, to open doors and to move ahead and to accomplish things. But then at the same time, you have this internal conflicting thing with identity. So how do you kind of like separate these two things and juggle them through life in a more harmonious way, where you understand and are conscious that you need identity in the marketplace to be successful, but at the same time, you need to stay calm and you need to go to bed with yourself every night and wake up, with a good sleep, and not wake up all jiggery and then have to go outside the marketplace and deal with not only the professional side, but also the social side. You get all these mixed things, and every
Thank you,
community
Eddie.
is different.
I'm going to have Blake jump in because we've got 1
Yeah,
minute left. You
go
get
ahead.
1 minute
Okay,
to answer. Thank you, Eddie.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
1
Sorry
minute.
about that.
No, I think the biggest thing is find what inner practices work to ground you and bring you back to you. Some people that's meditation, plant medicine we've talked about. Some people that's just, going for a run every day after work, playing with their kids. But I think that's really the thing is everyone's different. But what's not different is, we all have to be out there performing in some way. We all have to construct some form of an identity, some form of your personal brand. And that is important for our career. It just is. And so, but what also is important is to be able to recharge and come back to center and really come back to yourself so that you can show up in an authentic way versus just constantly constructing an identity. Because if you do that without checking in on yourself, then I think what Chip would say is the ego will become the architect of your identity. And then oftentimes you'll wake up with an identity that you don't respect. And so in order to have an identity that you really are proud of, you've got to have it being created from the heart and not from the ego.
Thank you so much.
Great.
So I'll just have to speak for Chip. What a beautiful conversation, Blake. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to watch the two of you like brothers, really sharing your stories together and being so generous with all of us. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Throw your praise down there in the chat, thanking Chip and Blake for this conversation. I'm seeing lots of applause. Thank you so much. Enjoy your time with your family. We did throw a couple of links in here. Blake is featured in our upcoming purpose course. He's going to be in Baja right before Christmas in December. Some opportunity to spend some more time with them in person. And thank you. We'll put the recording for this up on our YouTube channel. And Blake, have a great day. Thank you all for joining us. It was such a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, thanks. Bye, everyone.